Hey everyone, welcome to another Angry Artist podcast. So, this is actually something that I've heard a lot of people say when they start doing art. And it's the idea of I can see the image in my head, but I can't put it on paper or on canvas or whatever. Why does this happen? And how do I really put my images onto canvas in a efficient manner? So this is a multifaceted question. Now I'm not going to pretend that I understand everything that happens in our heads. Of course, not even the most established neurologists know what really happens with our minds. However, I do know that when we create scenes in our heads, they're actually really abstract in a way. We kind of try to trick ourselves into thinking we know so many details of the scene. And perhaps we do. Perhaps in your dreams that you are able to dissect all the details that happened and what you look like, what you're wearing, who you're with, and all of that in parts. Now that's a very key point. In parts. The rules of engaging into an artwork are very different. Now, assuming you're doing something like illustration, which is one canvas, one picture, you have to be able to frame your ideas into one square or rectangular canvas. Your dreams and your images in your head might work in a space that is different from a rectangle, but for the sake of illustration, we can't do that. Which means all your chaotic ideas may not work well with each other without being framed properly. So the other aspect of trying to transfer images from your head is that you might be able to see so many things, but of course, in an artwork, having those details will just overload the piece. Again, this goes back to my first point. You might be able to see so many different things, but part of being an artist is not just putting details on a piece of paper. You have to know what to put on a piece of paper, and more importantly, what not to put on the piece of paper. That is the key. Honestly, once you get to a certain level of technical skill, you realize you have the ability to draw anything. That doesn't mean you draw everything. And part of creating images is, again, to transfer your ideas in a very appealing way, and that comes down to simplification. Now, since I've already talked about other types of simplification, such as cubes, I wanted to talk about a way that I like to imagine my images before I put it on a canvas. Now, these concepts can be further developed if you were to study them. I suggest you look into Andrew Loomis' books if you haven't known them already. He was an incredible illustrator and educator, and he created books on how to simplify a lot of things in art. I'll be talking about a few that might help when you are trying to imagine scenes. So my first thing that I always do is, of course, list exactly what you need for your idea. For example, if you are to draw an airplane, you need to know what airplane it is and what is necessary to display the fact that it's an airplane. And of course, that sounds really obvious, but trust me, a lot of people do not understand that. An airplane will not read like an airplane if you do not have the right hints. And my previous video would have talked about that. You need hints to tell your audience what something is. We are creating illusions. The viewer can only use the sense of sight when it comes to your piece in order to depict what something is. So a plane would need 2 wings, for instance, or they would need propellers or something like that. Know exactly what is necessary, and that list will become very short and easy to comprehend. It's simplified for you. Now that you know what you need in terms of the subject matter, the next step is to break it down into values, black and white grayscale. Now you might say, oh man, we have so many values in our world. However, if you read Andrew Loomis's book, he talks about simplifying your piece into 4 main values. So of course you have white and black, and then you have light gray and dark gray. Your image should be able to work if your 4 values work. One of the best ways I like to practice is forcing yourself to paint with 4 values. Nothing else, hard edges only, no gradients. Just do a composition in 4 values. You might notice a lot of people like to make thumbnails, and they're actually very useful because they get your thoughts and your ideas in a very small scale and without all the details. So that tends to relate back to 4 values. You want to create thumbnails and such with very limited amount of values. This is also a much easier way to imagine a scene in your head. So think about your ideas and then break it down into 4 values. How are you going to, for example, depict your main subject matter? Is your character going to be white on a black background? Is it going to be black on the white background? Something that will catch attention. Or maybe a light gray on black or something. As long as you are able to see that in your head and put it down on paper, you will have a much easier time putting that image onto paper than if you were to just think in terms of details. Last but not least, let's go into color. Now, when you're dreaming or when you have an idea, you might have a trillion colors going on in your piece. But the way I like to see it is every artwork is built around one major mood color. Something that all the colors in your piece will be related to, for instance. And that main color will determine the mood of your piece. So for instance, if you have a very red scene, it might be a very active, very dangerous scene. As red is a great color to depict that sort of action scene going on. Or if you want to build around blues, then you'll probably have a more calm scene. Again, instead of thinking of your picture as a billion colors and details, think of just one color that will encompass the entire piece. If you think of these 3 things, you'll be able to really dissect any image in your head into something transferable into the art canvas. Again, our imaginations, we don't even know what the limits of our imaginations are. But the canvas is limited. What we can do with art is a lot more limiting than what we can imagine. We can't even depict reality 1-to-1 perfectly. Can you really imagine how we can really do that for what we think of? Probably not. So learn to simplify. Anyways, thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.